0500 92 95 00. Text 80295.
You're listening to Kaye on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Kaye Adams. Still to come a bit later on this morning, how do you discipline your kids? The Welsh Assembly is going to debate outlawing smacking altogether. And in Scotland, although it's not illegal, its use is very restricted and it's certainly not endorsed. So what does that leave you with? The naughty step, screaming like a banshee, pulling the plug out of the telly? Let me know how you keep your kids in line. 0500 92 95 00. And also, I would like to hear what you think about this story today of Ricky Gervais, who on his Twitter feed uses the word mong quite liberally. He says it's a comedy word. In no way does he want to cause offence or is he attaching it to particular groups of people. He just thinks it's funny. But there's a lot of folk out there who don't think it's funny. Certain disability groups feel, MenCap for instance, say it's very disappointing. Such language can perpetuate discriminatory attitudes. Let me know what you think about that by text or email 80295, or you can email me on callkay@bbc.co.uk. Should we avoid that kind of language, or are we being a wee bit too sensitive? Right, so let's return to our discussion about whether or not benefits and pensions should increase in line with the rate of inflation announced last night. Need to remind you, 5.2%. Historically, that is what would happen, but the government hasn't confirmed that it will do that, causing concern to groups like Child Poverty Action Group. John Dickey from Child Poverty Action has been telling us that this would hit all low-income families. If you're worried or you're concerned, give us a call, 0500 92 95 00. Been speaking to Andrew, who's a 75-year-old disabled pensioner. He's concerned for himself, but he's very much concerned for all families who find themselves in a position that prices are rising faster than their income. So as I say, if you're one of them or you're concerned, do give me a call. Jonathan Davis, wealth manager and economist. Just to go through a couple of the arguments that are coming out so far. This would obviously cost, if you are going to increase benefits and pensions in line with this rate of inflation, which is in advance of what was expected, then that costs money. Can we afford that money?
We can afford the money, but actually you're coming from it totally the wrong angle. It shouldn't be a question of how do we meet rising cost of living. What we should do is reduce the cost of living and therefore make it easier for the man and woman in the street. And we can easily do that if we raise the value of sterling, of pound sterling, then it will reduce the cost of heat and light, it will reduce the cost of food, it will reduce the cost of fuel. In other words, our living standard will be improved.
Right. So there are other ways of doing it, you would say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Instead, what they do is they print more money and they give it to the banks. Well, I've told your listeners before, that is the wrong solution. All that does is help the 1%. The 99% are being hurt by all this. OK, all right. We've got George from Inverurie. Morning, George.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning.
I wish that gentleman who just spoke there, the wealth management spokesperson, I wish he was in charge of the Treasury, because the British government are at it again. We have one of the worst pensions in Europe. And here they are. Last night on the TV, the spokesperson for the Treasury would not commit that the Treasury would stick to the rules to pay the pensioners the increase on inflation of 5.1. Now, it's already been decreased from the RPI. They moved it on to the CPI because it was cheaper. Now, they would not guarantee that they would stick to that rule. In fact, it's been mentioned that in the next form of the equation, they would take out the VAT and the energy quotient that's in that calculation, which makes it even worse. And I'm absolutely terrified that those people, as the gentleman said, the 99%, it's going to put an intolerable imbalance on our health service, because the people who can't afford to eat properly, heat properly, are going to end up in hospitals, and it's going to put an intolerable burden on our National Health Service.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I'm sitting looking at some comments from Mervyn King, the Governor of the Bank of England, this morning, and he's saying that actually we need to be cutting, nations and families need to slash even more from their budgets, that actually things aren't even tight enough.
I would like to ask Mervyn King what his income is. and how much he's prepared to cut from his salary, if they're going to take a small portion of the ridiculously low pension from pensioners and people who need benefit assistance, if they're going to want it from them, how much are these people in these grossly inflated salaries going to contribute to the thing that this fella Cameron said, we're all in it together? We are not.
Mm-hmm.
Kaye, can I just add? Don't worry about Mervyn King. His pension's index-linked, so please don't worry about him or indeed the MPs, because they're going to be okay. And you need to understand that Mervyn King, for the last 3 years, every single quarter that they've come out with the inflation forecast, they've said that inflation would fall. In fact, every single quarter, inflation has risen. They don't know what they're doing. They're hurting the man and woman in the street. Hike the interest rates now, hike the value of currency, reduce the cost of living. That's the solution.
Well, I mean, George would have you in the Treasury or perhaps in Mervyn King's job, Jonathan. I don't know if you'd be prepared to take that on. But, I mean, as you say, inflation has not gone in the direction that they would have wanted. But there are many, many voices, credible voices, who would say that this is a temporary blip.
No, it's
that
not
the rate of inflation, well, let me just say it anyway, that the rate of inflation will come down next year. And therefore, if you were to link pensions and benefits to this 5.2% inflation rate, which they're seeing as exceptional, then it would go ahead of the general rate of inflation.
Yeah, these voices are not credible. I know who you're talking about. You're talking about the people from the city, you're talking about city economists, you're talking about the Bank of England, you're talking about politicians. These people are not credible. They have been telling us nonsense for years. These are the people who said there wouldn't be an economic crash. Well, there was. People like me were saying there would be an economic crash. People like me were saying there's going to be rising inflation if you carry on decimating the value of our currency. They are not credible. That's the point. They are in the majority, but they're not credible.
OK, well, we'll let our listeners make up their mind, and I'm interested as always to know what you think. 0500 92 95 00. Anonymous text here, I've worked as a care worker for 11 years and I haven't had a wage rise for the last 6 years. What about people like us? Neil from Edinburgh, frankly, I don't care if the work-shy folks around are paid less. Different for pensioners who have contributed and the disabled, justified disabled. After all, most workers haven't had a pay rise. I mean, coming back to John Dickey from the Child Poverty Action Group, you may not be on any kind of welfare benefits, but you can still be finding it very tough, John. I mean, this person here is a care worker for 11 years, hasn't had a wage rise for the last 6 years. They're just going to have to suck it up as far as the inflation's concerned, aren't they?
I mean, absolutely, we shouldn't be creating this sort of false division between people in work and on very low wages and people out of work or working fewer hours who are receiving a combination of wages and benefits and tax credits. The point is all of them are going to be hit hard. The national minimum wage hasn't been keeping up with inflation in real terms and the real rising costs that our lowest income families are facing. So we need to see a far more aggressive approach to ensure that the national minimum wage is increased, and here in Scotland to build on the commitments that have been made to a living wage to ensure that those people who are in work or trying to get into work on low incomes are getting the incomes that they need to meet these rising costs.
So what would you do, John? I mean, if you were elevated to the Treasury, we put Jonathan Davis to one side for a second, what would you do, John?
Well, what we would do is actually do what the government says it's wanting to do, which is to be fair and to be the most family-friendly country in Europe. In Europe, we would ensure that those with the broadest shoulders do bear the burden of the financial situation that the country's in.
So you would increase tax for the high earners, basically.
Exactly. We have to remember in all this debate that we're still living in an extraordinarily wealthy country. The wealth of the 1,000 richest individuals, according to the Sunday Times rich list, went up by 1,000 richest individuals just in the UK went up by £77 billion in the year 2009-10. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking there's not the resources resources, that there isn't the wealth in this country. The problem is it's not being distributed in a fair way, and that means those who are both out of work for whatever reason, caring responsibilities, ill health, disability, who are in work but on very low pay, are suffering far, far more than those who could afford to contribute to the financial situation.
OK, John, well, you would tax the rich. That's usually pretty popular. 0500 92 95 00. Let me know what you think. Or you can text me on 80295. We've got Tom, who's back on that train. Morning, Tom, on a train.
Morning, Kaye. How you doing?
I'm good. What are you thinking?
Increased benefits in line with inflation. But also, you've got a chap on there just now who claims to be an economist and a wealth manager, and he's talking absolute nonsense, to be honest.
Well, it's Jonathan Davis, and if you can take him on, you're a better man than me, Gunga Din, so off you go.
Right, OK, so what Jonathan's suggesting is that we increase the value of the pound. We're currently the most indebted nation in the world per head of capita, well, in the Western world, but per head of capita. By increasing the value of the pound, what we're doing is actually increasing the value of people's debts. That's what he's suggesting doing. So I think on average, I was reading it last week, that the average household in Britain's got a debt of about £48,000. If you increase the value of the pound by 25%, you're increasing that to £52,000 effectively. So that's the effective. So,
and that's what Mervyn King is saying. The root of this crisis is debt. That we need to get rid of the debt.
Yeah, OK, so what you do, right, is you actually devalue the pound. So what that does is devalues the value of the debt, not increase the value of the debt, which Jonathan's actually suggesting doing.
Jonathan, you've got competition.
Sure, and that's the opposing argument. In response, I will say there are more savers in the UK than there are borrowers. So therefore, if we help the savers, then they will have more money to spend to get the economy going. Also, if we help the pound, I repeat, it will reduce the cost of imports, which will reduce the cost of living for everyone in the country, and particularly for small and medium-sized businesses who are trying to get their businesses moving, and they will be the engine of growth by employing people. By continuing devaluing the currency, we are inflating our economy, which means that the man and woman in the street cannot survive because they're not getting interest on their savings, they're not getting the pay rises to meet the cost of living, and the businesses are hurting, thus we're getting increased unemployment. Actually, I do understand economics.
Well, I'm a little bit troubled by that, Jonathan, because at the last, I work in the banking sector. And,
exactly.
Well, I'm not a banker. Actually, I work in IT in the banking sector. I'm just a normal guy that does data analysis for banking sectors. That's all I do. I'm not a banker. I don't get any bonuses. I don't get any of that kind of.
You get paid by a bank, don't you?
But I don't think that necessarily means that you can.
Is there some kind of sin in working for a bank, Jonathan? Because to be honest, you'd have nowhere to put your money. Because if you're acting as a wealth advisor, you're one of the guys that's advised people to put money into probably fairly rocky things in the past. So,
well, hang on. Let's not start trading. Let's not start trading insults, gentlemen. I think we'll accept that Tom's a hard-working guy who pays his taxes, and we don't need to doubt his motivation because he happens to be employed by a bank. Go on, Tom.
Okay, we're in debt for as a nation to the tune of £6.7 trillion.
Do you have a big mortgage yourself, sir?
I do have a very big mortgage.
Well, yes. Exactly. You're thinking about the borrowers. You're not thinking about the savers.
And I'm actually thinking about the country, to be honest, Jonathan.
Yes,
because
and so am I.
Well, listen, I don't think we're going to thrash out
a record level of debt. Not just individuals. Britain is at a record level of debt. So if you increase the value of the pound, you increase the value of Britain's debt, and that's what everybody's whining about just now. Every man in the street, the amount of debt that Britain's in, not just me, not just everybody I know who's got a mortgage, every person I know moans about the value of the debt that Britain has. You increase the value of the pound, you increase the value of Britain's debt.
Well, listen,
not the
interesting
individual's
and
debt.
fascinating though this is, Tom and Jonathan, I don't think we are going to be able to resolve this kind of fundamental economic schism on this programme. Wouldn't it be great if we could? So let's just kind of return to where we started, and that is the plight of people who are in receipt of benefits and on a pension, and how they are going to be affected if their pensions and welfare benefits do not get increased by 5.2%, which is the current rate of inflation. And Dennis Grattan from Aberdeen via email brings us back very kind of neatly saying, Kaye, your programme today is very important to highlight those on fixed and low incomes who, owing to inflation ripping at over 5% are in for a hard time this winter with no help offered from the government. Many families will drop into fuel poverty for the first time and have no budget to plan for this. So let's stop bailing out the bankers and care for the people. Is that how you feel? 0500 92 95 00. What should we be doing? I mean, clearly this is one aspect. We've heard other people say we need to start taxing the rich, taking from the people who have got oodles and pots of money and giving to the people who are living more or less on the breadline. Let me know what you think about that. Bet is in Largs. Good morning, Bet.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I'm getting a lesson in economics today and my head is bursting.
Well, I'm not really on about economics, but I am on about the amount of money paid to people living abroad.
Right.
Almost $1 million of taxpayers' money is paid in benefits every week to people who claim they're too sick to work here but are living abroad.
Right.
There were 8,350 people claiming incapacity benefit from outside Britain. And they pick up about £80 a week. I've got a piece out last Sunday's paper claiming £37 million a year. Now, they also get winter fuel payments. Last year, it cost the taxpayers £15.2 million for that. Can we afford this to people going to live in Florida or Spain on winter?
Right. Well, I mean, you picked up something, to be honest, Bet, that I wasn't aware of. We've got Fergus Muirhead, who's our financial expert. Fergus, were you aware of that?
Well, some people who do live abroad and get pensions abroad because they've contributed to the tax and national insurance system when they were living in the UK.
Of course.
They're probably entitled to these benefits overseas.
Right.
But the disability living allowance or the winter fuel payments, is that... I mean, I just don't think this is sensible.
I mean, the interesting thing there, just in terms of the numbers that you're talking about, Bet, and I mean, whilst not in any way insignificant, in terms of the numbers, going back to Jonathan Davis, that are being, ploughed into banks and quantitative easing, when we're talking about 75 billion, they are kind of dwarfed by comparison. And I suppose that's where this whole discussion comes up, as to there is money swimming about the system, but where should it go? Where is it best used? And what John Dickey would say from Child Poverty Action Group is that we need to be protecting those in need. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely, as it's them that's been hit the hardest by these soaring prices. So we, and I suppose we made the point earlier that we do have the money in this country. It's not just about progressive taxation and higher taxation that to ensure that those people who can afford to contribute, but also about tackling some of the extraordinary wage pay inequality we see in this country. Unusually high discrepancy between those on the lowest pay and those on the highest pay. So in terms of tackling that kind of those underlying drivers of poverty that means so many people are struggling to get by, part of that is looking at how do we distribute pay in this country and tackling the low pay culture we have here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Fergus, I've said this morning a couple of times that although the government has not confirmed what it is going to do in terms of welfare and pension benefits and whether they're going to be raised at the rate of inflation, that they haven't said they won't do it. What's your understanding?
Well, it depends on which paper you read this morning. I think that there are some papers not mentioning this issue at all, and other ones saying that, as you've rightly said, they haven't said either way. I think someone else is saying that they don't normally make this decision until November or December anyway. So why would they make a comment today? So I'm not sure whether there's people getting concerned, because we're moving from this measure of inflation from retail price index to consumer price index from April next year, as you've already said. And because there's a discrepancy between the two measures of inflation, there is talk about whether the benefits will be increased by the whole 5.2%. But I've seen nothing official to say that won't be the case. And if it was the case, it's certainly the first time it's happened. And I think there would be a kind of general uproar if the government did confirm they were going to do it this way. Because it's not what's expected and it's not what's supposed to happen.
Right, OK. We've got Rosemary on the line, I think, from Cyprus. Good morning, Rosemary.
Yes, good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. Go on then, make us all feel sick. What's the weather like in Cyprus?
It's 22 degrees and sunny.
Oh, well,
I'm just
enjoy.
considering going in and putting my T-shirt on. I'm working in the garden and I'm getting too hot.
Enough
but that's
already.
Not what I'm phoning about. I'm phoning because somebody earlier said what we should do is devalue the pound. Now, I mean, I live over here because I can't afford to live in Scotland, and that is the truth. If I lived in Scotland, I'd be on benefits. I don't want to take benefits. But to be honest with you, if they devalue the pound, I'm ready for sticking my money under my mattress.
Yeah.
For all I get through the banks, it's absolutely nothing. I'm living virtually on my savings and a basic pension.
Right. So Rosemary, tell me your story. You were living here in Scotland, yeah?
Oh, I've lived there all my life, yes.
On a pension?
But I'm now a pensioner,
right.
And I'm living on a pension in Cyprus.
Right.
Now, the gentleman earlier was talking about cold weather payments, or a lady was talking about cold weather payments. Now, cold weather payments I don't get because I left before I was 60.
Right.
I left here, I came here when I was in my late 50s. So I don't get cold weather payments.
Mm-hmm.
But you do get a cold weather payment here, so I don't see why, if you paid in all your dues all your life, you shouldn't get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you're living here and you're getting a cold weather payment here, you're getting double.
Right.
But I don't get that.
Right, you don't
I only
get that.
get the cold weather payment in Cyprus.
Right. So
but really what I was phoning about was the savings angle. The fact that the savings I'm putting in the UK, I'm getting nothing for. And yet people are having to pay back enormous amounts on their loans. Why don't they give the savers a wee bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Take away from the bankers. I mean, they're making all this new money and they've handed it over to the bankers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's wrong with us? The pensioners should be out there lining the streets and marching on government. We're a strong body. If we got together, we could do something about this situation. This government's taking us to the corners.
You need to come home to do that, though, Rosemary. Though I suppose there's riots much closer to home where you are in Cyprus at the moment about the way the government is behaving. But Rosemary, just to clarify, you didn't leave here to go and live the high life in Cyprus. You left because you couldn't afford to stay here.
I left because I wanted to go try living abroad at
right.
some point in my life, and as it happens, I do like it.
Yeah.
But I can't afford to live in the UK on my pension. I can afford to live here on my pension. I mean, my rates here, my village rates a year are £24 a year.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even afford to pay rates at home a month.
Yeah. And food and all clothes, all your kind of basics are cheaper
well,
there.
I don't buy a lot of clothes. I mean, I'm older. I'm not bothered about what I wear, to be honest. I mean, I get what I can when I can.
Yeah.
But food is expensive, but daily living is not.
Right.
It's a village rates, really. £24 a year, Kaye. How would you like to be paying that?
Well, I know that's incredible, but I mean, you've kind of taken me aback, actually, Rosemary, and I'm glad you phoned in, to actually say that to live on your pension at home would be, I mean, obviously it is more expensive to live here because of things like our weather. We just have to be more bundled up. We tend to spend more time inside, so we're having to heat ourselves. We're probably eating different food. I mean, the climate of Cyprus and places like that probably is a financial benefit in itself, but
it's a big benefit because I've not got my heating on. I mean, it's 22 degrees here and I still haven't put on a fire inside. But I couldn't afford that. If I was at home, I'd have hypothermia.
Yeah.
Somebody would have to dig me out.
Rosemary,
or go on benefits, which I think I don't want to do. I want to put that off as long as possible. But then, the inevitability of it is I will, if I come home, have to go on benefits.
But you think savers should be getting a better deal, basically?
Well, definitely. I mean, it's ridiculous. 2.5%. I mean, And I'm struggling to live on any interest I get because I'm getting practically no interest.
Rosemary, let's bring in Audrey, who's in not so sunny Kilwinning. Good morning, Audrey.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. What's your position?
Well, I'm a carer, and they talk about the pensioners marching on the government. I think if every carer started to march, they would soon know what hit them. Carers are running at the moment at £55.55 a week. Mm-hmm. In my circumstance, I get topped up a little bit with income support.
Uh-huh.
Now, that still brings you in at £196.95 a fortnight.
Right.
To live on, and that's doing a carer's job 24/7, saving the government I don't know how much money, taking on nursing skills, etc., etc., and yet how are we meant to live? Mm-hmm. We don't get the heating allowance. We get a £10 Christmas bonus. £10, that's never ever changed, and I've been a carer since I was 39. I'm now 53.
Right. And so when you see the inflation rate going up, which basically means all of our kind of basics and our cost of living going up, then, you know, that obviously means a big deal to you.
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, for instance, the only way I can survive is I don't buy any new clothes. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell you the last time I went out. I've never had a holiday in years.
Yeah.
I don't run a car. I don't get on the bus unless it's absolutely necessary. I walk wherever I'm going. Because £2 on bus fare, you can do an awful lot with £2.
Yeah.
And if every carer in this country started to stand up and be counted, when you get the budgets come out, the newspapers are full of what are married couples going to get, what a pensioner's going to get, what you're getting if you're a family, and I've yet to read in a newspaper about the carer situation.
Yeah.
I started caring when I was 39, and my carer's income then was about £39 a week. Now, over that period of time, it's gone to £55. There's a lot of rises happened in that time.
Oh, certainly.
And that is very, very poor. And I would love to hear somebody from the government, for one, standing up and acknowledging the money we're saving them. We're not taking anything out of the benefit system. We're actually contributing more to the benefit system.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Audrey, you've explained your finances to us, and I think anyone who's listening would say, well, you know, in terms of Mervyn King saying we have to cut further, you've got nowhere to cut, and, you know...
You have nowhere to cut. Yeah. You literally, the only way I survive is the fact that many a carer, we've been living like this for so long, we're absolutely experienced in it.
Yeah.
We can save a penny and make a pound stretch, you know, but there comes a limit where it's just, everything's just going to get out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the same story that Rosemary gives us. You just kind of live on as little as you can, and she's got the benefit of a bit of sunshine, which is worth a bit. But it's tough. Audrey, thank you very much for explaining your circumstances, sir. There's nothing I can say except, I don't know where you go from here. Let me think. Tell me what you think, folks. 0500 92 95 00. What's happening on the travel?
Thanks, Kaye. Well, weather-related problems. There's a high wind warning on the Skye Bridge, and please tell me heavy rain causing problems on some roads throughout the Highlands, especially stretches of the A835 Ullapool to Tor Road. The A82 in Invergarry-Speen Bridge Road resurfacing works at Loch Lochy will slow you down in both directions. There's also a convoy system in place here, but the works will be removed at 4:30 this afternoon. Heading into Edinburgh on the M8, an earlier breakdown at Hermiston Gate roundabout is now clear, so any delays on the city-bound M8 will ease shortly. In Giffnock, Eastwood Main Road remains closed eastbound from Otterburn Drive to William Wood Shops. If you're heading for Clarkston, you'll have to divert through Newton Mearns at the toll roundabout. And disruption and delays on trains between Kilwinning and Paisley Gilmore Street, and that's due to signalling problems. And that's BBC Radio Scotland Travel.
Thanks very much, Rita. You're listening to Call Kaye on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Kaye Adams. Still to come this morning, the Welsh Assembly are set to discuss a ban on smacking children. But when it comes to disciplining your children, What do you do? We've had the age-old debate over whether to smack or not for years, but if you don't go down that road, just how do you keep your kids in line? Is it the naughty step? Is it screaming like a banshee? Is it no sweeties for a month? And what about you and your partner? Do you agree or disagree over the best way to keep the kids in line? I'd love to hear your experiences. 0500 92 95 00. You can text 80295. Andrew, the firefighter, says, for keeping the kids in line in our house, we use the Nana effect. If you don't behave, I'll tell your Nana. She takes no guff from anyone, not even us. I think we need Andrew's Nana for all of us here. And also we've had some reaction to the story about Ricky Gervais using, in a comedy way, he would say, the expression mong. Some groups, disability groups, are concerned about this. They think it is insensitive. He says that he's not making any reference to any particular group, just thinks it's a funny word, and we need to kind of get over it. Words change and their meanings change over the years. Joe from Camelin says, I don't like Gervais much anyway, but he's more to be pitied than scolded. I tend to think that PC has gone a bit far. I'm a visually impaired amputee, but I fail to see what's wrong with the word handicapped. Dave, who's in a motor, says, I can't see the problem using the word mong as long as it's not been directed at disabled people. We used it all the time in the army and even called our coveralls mong suits. Never seen anyone complain when a similar action was used in sketches and chewing the fat. Too many people these days ready to be offended on others' behalf. And Keith in Five says Ricky Gervais is vile. It's not the first time he's insulted disability. He has also insulted and offended those affected by ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. And he's still not funny. And Jim in Aberdeen via email, I'm not related to any disabled person, but that word is offensive. Gervais and his cronies, such as Jonathan Ross, are all the same. Not funny. And when they've not been in the media spotlight for some time, they come out with stuff like this to put them in it. Gervais has now got what he wanted from using that word. 1 week's free publicity. Oh, you're a cynic, Jim, but then you might not be wrong. Let me know how you feel about it. Do you find it offensive or not? Not just that word, but other words that we kind of use perhaps a little bit too casually. Getting back to the subject of whether or not welfare benefits and pensions should rise in line with inflation, 5.2%, as was announced yesterday. Higher, I think 0.7% higher than was expected. There is some doubt over whether the government will follow its historic course of action, which is to raise benefits in line with the September rate of inflation. That would cost them an initial £1.2 billion in cost. Perhaps they can't afford it. We don't know what they're going to do. But if they don't raise these benefits and pensions in line with inflation, what effect is it going to have on you? We've already heard from people this morning who are absolutely cut to the bone. There's nowhere to go for them from here, they feel. We've got John in Denburn, up in Aberdeenshire. Good morning, John.
Good morning, yes.
Good morning to you.
Well, I strongly feel that we need to be paying the increase in benefits. The disparity between rich and poor has been growing over the recent years, whereas most of last century it declined. We need to dramatically reduce it, and we'll actually have a much healthier society. Both the very rich will be healthier for actually having a narrower differential between the rich and the poor. Mm-hmm. I think studies are now showing this, comparative studies over the world. Part of the unhealth of the American society is caused by the great disparity between rich and poor, and we're the same in Britain. Mm-hmm. So there's both a benefit for everybody, but there's also a basic moral responsibility to be looking after the more vulnerable in society.
I mean, do you feel uncomfortable, John, when you do see and hear, and we've heard this morning, the kind of situation that some people are living in, really very close to the bone?
I do feel uncomfortable. I also think it's going to get significantly worse. We haven't seen the rises in fuel that are going to happen over the next 10 years. As the world gets back into economic prosperity, which it will, then consumption of oil will rise. It's a fairly finite supply for a number of reasons, and the price will escalate again. We have a fundamental problem.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in Fergus Muirhead again, financial expert. Fergus, I'm just picking up on the couple of calls that we had just before the travel there, Audrey and Our Lady from Cyprus. Actually saying that she can't afford to live on a pension in Scotland, and Audrey, with her carer's allowance, just completely just existing, you know. I mean, really nothing, not a penny spare. Is there any hope in the horizon for people in that situation?
Well, I think that, you know, they hit on some very important points, Kaye, because they were both talking about the very poor rates that are available for savers at the moment. And of course, if inflation's rising over 5% and people are getting nothing or 1% before tax on their savings, then it means that people are going to get further and further behind as things are going to become more difficult. So I don't know if there's a bit of imaginative thinking that needs to be looked at here, where there's perhaps a base rate for borrowing and a separate base rate for saving. So rather than, while we've got 0.5%, which is the Bank of England base rate at the moment, which is what borrowing is based on. So it was great if you're borrowing money. We could have a separate base rate for savers, and we could base savings rates on a slightly different index, which meant that while inflation was sitting at 5%, people were getting a kind of sensible amount of return on their savings income.
I mean, Jonathan Davis, I mean, you know, you've got your big kind of macroeconomic pitch, if you like, and where you think the government is going wrong and what you think they should be doing. You know, and I know you feel very strongly that the banks are being given money and, you know, wrongly, and it's not going to do the right thing and it's not deserved. What about just that basic thing of tax the rich? All sorts of people out there who've got a lot, should just be paying a little bit more. I've got a text in from a woman who's saying, well, no, my 3 daughters have all worked hard. They're high earners, but, you know, they've put in the effort. Why shouldn't they have it? You know, so there's that side of the coin as well. But what's your thoughts?
I think if there weren't an alternative, then taxing the super rich would be appropriate. But again, we're all missing the point here. If we stop bailing out the banks, if we stop giving vast sums of money to the bankers, please be assured there will be plenty of money in the government's coffers to pay whatever benefits anyone needs. When you consider that we're talking about £1 or £2 billion here compared to the hundreds of billions of pounds that we've given to a couple of 100,000 millionaires and billionaires, join the dots.
Yeah, but, you know, just on another point of what you're saying about if interest rates rise, that's something you said earlier. There's loads and loads and loads and loads of people there, ordinary people out there, not super rich, who've got a mortgage, like Stephen from Ayr, who says if interest rates rise, those of us with mortgages will suffer while the banks will make more.
And no, they won't. The fact is, large swathes of the population borrowed imprudently, and not just to buy property, but to live in, but also for so-called investments. That's greed. Also for credit cards and overdrafts and car loans. That's just consumerism gone crazy, benefiting the banks again. And the simple fact is there are more savers than there are borrowers.
Yeah, but you know what? That's a lot of ordinary people that you are talking about there, Jonathan.
And there are more savers than there are borrowers, and they are ordinary people too.
Yeah, so I mean, we are back to pitching ordinary people against ordinary people. I mean, there's a whole load of folk who thought, well, you know what? I've got a good job. The economy seems to be doing well. You know, I'd like to get a nice house for me and my partner and the kids, and I'm going to stretch myself on the mortgage, and I'm going to have a car. It's not a crime, is it?
I'm not suggesting it's a crime, but you and I both know, and all your listeners know, that for the decade up until 15 years, up until a couple of years ago, this country went on an absolute orgy of debt and spend. It was totally imprudent. We were spending far more than we were earning. Now, everyone knows that cannot continue. And now that we've got all these people who've got vast debts, these are the people who should be helped out by the people who have saved prudently, who didn't spend wantonly, and we should be bailing out the bankers and the borrowers as compared to the people who were prudent and who did intelligent, safe things. No, I think we have a crazy system that what we're doing continually, and Mervyn King and the Prime Minister's successive Prime Ministers, they always say, help the borrowers, help the rich. No, this is totally inappropriate. We need to help the prudent. That's the way to sort out the root problems in our economy and indeed in our society.
OK, well, we're going to speak to Jim in Ayr and John. Sorry, who was that?
It's John in Aberdeen.
Oh, hi, John. Go on then.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. We have overspent, but I think there are more complexities to that. A lot of the overspending has been on housing, and we need to sort the housing supply. And that needs fundamental changes in Britain in order that we make land available, we make brown sites available, we reduce the cost of land so that the cost of new housing comes down dramatically, and the cost then of rents will come down, so that housing becomes, instead of perhaps the major source of expenditure for lower incomes, becomes something that's relatively affordable. That's one way we can improve things.
Well, certainly the situation with housing is another kind of blot on the landscape coming up, isn't it? I mean, we just don't have enough houses, and we know just from recent weeks, private rents are going up, putting them out of the reach of a lot of kind of ordinary families. So there's definitely something looming on the horizon there, unfortunately.
And can I also say that in terms of giving money to the bankers, during the American Civil War, the North financed our war through just by printing money. It did not devalue the dollar. And at this situation at the moment, we should be...
That is rubbish.
No, it
that
is not.
Absolute rubbish.
It
The northern currency in the United States fell 50%. The Confederate dollar fell 95%, but it devalued 50%.
Yeah, however, the whole of the war was financed through effectively printing money. Right. And instead of putting money in the banks, if we were investing in our infrastructure, in broadband, in our communication systems, putting in the roads, redoing the railways, we were building a future for Britain. We would be creating employment. They are both strategies that would not introduce huge imports, so it wouldn't have a hugely detrimental impact on our balance of trade, which is fairly essential, and it would be fueling a regeneration in Britain and investing for the future. And would have precisely the effect in terms of invigorating the economy and solving some of the economic issues around banking. We need to break up the banking system so that ordinary savings like building societies and so on can now flourish again, and that solves some of the circle around the financial issues. There's a whole range of things we need to be doing which are fundamentally different, and of course we should be taxing the rich. And they'll leave. And to be honest, I'm not sure that'll make much difference. The economic driver, actually the middle class, is not the super rich.
Yeah. John, you've given me another discussion for tomorrow. The rich, would we miss them? 0500 92 95 00. I'm penciling that one in now.
Branson's already doesn't live here. He's got an island in the West Indies and his house burnt down.
I know. I wonder if he'll be able to afford to build another one. Yeah.
Or
two, yeah, absolutely. John, thanks for that. We've got Jim in here. Morning, Jim.
Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Oh, I'm getting an education this morning, Jim, I can tell you.
Oh, I can hear it.
Goodness gracious. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that, I have a hell of a lot of sympathy for people in low-paid jobs, and they've had wage freezes for a couple of years or a 1% increase, and they must be finding it tough. I'm a pensioner, yeah, and you believe me, I can find it tough, but my heart goes out to other people who's working hard and still not getting an increase. Mm-hmm. But can I just say, Kate, that it makes me angry to think that the government might go back on their promises, previous government promises, increasing, pension rate to the RPI 5.2. We have just agreed down here for South Ayrshire Council. Our rent increases, Kay, is going to be 5.2% for the next 3 years.
Year on year?
Yes, 5.2%. Okay? Now, there are people in Scotland worse off. Until this year, our rent increases was based on the RPI figure, September figure, plus 1%. Mm-hmm. There'll be plenty of people in Scotland whose rent increase this year, next year, will be 6.2%. And it's all very well for people to say, yeah, a hell of a lot of people get help with their rent to pay their rent. Mm-hmm. But an awful lot of people like myself who refused to buy their council house through principle. Mm-hmm. We didn't believe it was the right thing to do. And by God, we'll be paying with our principles, I can assure you.
Yeah.
But as I say, my heart does go to people who's been working hard, really working hard, and not getting much an increase, Kay. But I don't see this government having the guts. Well, they might have, but surely their Liberal friends will make sure that won't happen. surely they'll join with Labour and block any move of this government to go back on their promises.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, Fergus, you were saying that there's no real pressure to make an announcement until later in the year.
No, that's right, and it's interesting listening to Jim there talking about rent increases as well, because of course it's the September figure that dictates what these increases are going to be for next year, and I think there's a sense in which we're unfortunate this year that the September figure is the highest we've had for years. There are other years where the September figure has probably been lower than the average for the rest of the 12 months, and therefore people have had lower rent increases than perhaps has been averaged for the 12 months, but it's that September figure that dictates what happens in April next year. And as we said, nothing has been cast, nobody seems to be saying anything formally, but what the government does seem to be saying is that they wouldn't normally make that kind of decision until November anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Jim used the expression, go back on their promises, and whilst I see what you're saying, Jim, I don't suppose we can actually say that, can we, Fergus? Because this has been a custom and practice to this point, but because we have this, unexpectedly high inflation rate, it might be something that many people would review.
Well, it might be something you would review. I mean, it depends on how you use the word promise and guarantee, and I think governments change the rules all the time. We just need to wait and see. I don't think there's any point speculating too much until we see what the government says in November.
Jim, last word to you.
Yeah, I don't think even a Tory government, Kate, even a Tory government would go ahead with this. I'm quite sure of it, because they can now find money. They found money for different things. Just recently, last week, they found money about people retiring early. They found billions of pounds to make that go away. So, I mean, when the crunch comes to the crunch, can you honestly see any government trying to stop pensioners for getting what they're due? I very much doubt it.
Well, Jim, I love your optimism, and I just can't resist this. And keep it brief, Jonathan. Could you see them possibly doing that?
No.
You can't either, right? Okay, thank you. Well, I will take it at that. Jonathan Davis, thank you very much. Always an entertaining discussion. Well, illuminating discussion, I would say, when you join us. So thanks very much. Thank you, Fergus, and to everyone else we're speaking to this morning. And thank you very much for giving me a bit of a lecture in the nicest possible way on economics. Fred, I learnt something today, Fred Macaulay.